So,
Well, I hope you're not expecting anything interesting. That would be a big letdown.
yeah. Well, you're not the first mad person I've interviewed, so now I know to temper my expectations.
Keep them way low, way low.
Yeah. So with this interview, we did an interview before, but there were some connection issues, and hopefully this will be one we can maybe rehash some of the stuff we talked about, so it can be standalone. But it'll be yeah, we can hopefully get to a little more than we were able to get to last time.
Yeah, and I would like to point out to everyone that the connection issues were not between you and I. We connected like that, but
That
it
is
was
true. Thank you. Yes.
connections. I just
Yeah.
don't want people to expect any sort of discomfort or awkwardness.
I have been called off-putting, so I'm glad to know the connection was not also between you and I.
I've been off-putting for the past couple of months, but it was mostly for Lent.
Yeah.
You know, I gave up just the tapioca though. You can't get me off of butterscotch. It's just for God or anyone.
Butterscotch is one of the uh, underrated flavors, I think, of candy.
It really is, and it also is it harkens back to my days of in the exotic dancing trade. You know, was one of my many stage names, so it'll have a special place in my heart, I think.
Okay, now I think you made a comment like that before, and so is that a joke, or did you also at one point actually work as an exotic dancer?
I mean, the temptation was always there, and obviously, you know, you're looking at me, you can see, you know, the offers were pouring in. But actually, no, but I did used to do cartoons for like nudie magazines and stuff when I first started out.
Yeah, and
When I was
were those well, yeah, we can jump right into there. What was your first like professional gig as a writer or as an artist too? You're an artist as well.
Yeah, and that's being very generous. But when I first started out, I did do both, and then I got to the point where um, I could not really compete with the drawing, and certainly with the speed at which I drew, which you know, it takes me a while and it doesn't look right to me. So that's why I mostly write now and have people that I work with who can draw. But when I first started out, yeah, it was you know, less competitive down at the level I was working, and I guess the first professional thing would have been the Joe Bob Briggs stuff that I mentioned last time, um, and then after that, it was like the Hustler magazines, and at the time, this was like the mid '90s. They had a lot of different magazines, and so you could send in a packet of a dozen or so cartoons to your cartoon editor, and they published so many different cartoons that they could just place them pretty much all of them just in their various magazines if they liked you.
Yeah, yeah.
They were
So one thing I wanted I couldn't remember that guy's name, and but this is the guy, right? Joe Bob Briggs.
yes, that's him.
Yeah, and so we were able to talk a little bit about him. He was like I'm in the Midwest, and in
Mm,
Chicago there was Sven Gulli, and he
mm,
was on like all of the public access channels before he made it big onto MeTV. So this was like your like Texas equivalent of Sven Gulli.
I mean, kind of, because he started out as he goes to movie critic, and he was a character of the Dallas Morning News, I think it was, or Dallas Times Herald movie critic, and he also did, he reviewed mainstream movies under his real name, and then he created this pseudonym and created a character to go along with it for the movies that they would send him to see, that like the Grindhouse, B horror and exploitation movies, and he created this character, Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In,
Yeah.
and that was popular and successful enough to where they were published in collections, and I think that's where, and I think there was like TNT Monster Vision back in the, I want to say, 80s or 90s, and he did something similar to that for TNT,
Okay.
where he would produce, like you said, like Svengoolie or Elvira, introduce the
Mhm.
movie, and then pop in here and there to offer trivia, make jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So what was it that you were doing for him?
He had a humor magazine that, because all of his Joe Bob reviews were intended to be satirical. I mean, he could very well be enjoying these movies. I have no reason that why he's not, but the character is very satirical,
Yeah.
and it usually involved telling a story that led up to, and after this crazy thing happened, I went to the drive-in and watched Humanoids from the Deep, and then it would go into the review. It was always kind of more about whatever humorous, fictional adventure he had supposedly had the week that he had seen the movie. But yeah, it was a magazine that just had like some of these reviews, and then it had cartoons and humor columns by other people. So it was just kind of like a hodgepodge of humor bits and pieces, and I sent him copies of the self-published humor magazine that I was doing at the time, and then he gave it a really nice review in magazine, and then started using my cartoons in the magazine at that time.
Yeah, and so like the self-published thing, you were doing zines of your own making, right? I mean, is that like would that be the proper term for what you were doing?
Yeah, very much so. There was like a back in the I guess mid '90s. It was a whole uh, I guess I don't want to say a revolution or anything, but it was its own little movement, I guess, where everyone was making a zine, and there were magazines that would review zines and books that would review zines, and so it was kind of a I just kind of came along at, I think, just the right time.
Yeah. I think maybe revolution is like the right term for it because it does seem to um I don't know. I mean, even like if people weren't able, like you took your zine and it like brought you into like professional work. And I mean,
Hmm.
even if people didn't have that amount of success, at least it's an outlet for creativity that
Yeah,
people have just full control over. It was like one of those nice moments where the gatekeeper was circumvented.
yeah. You're right. They could just get out the work that they wanted to get out, and I mean, I have friends that I made back then that I'm still friends with, that we talk every now and then. But yeah, and it was kind of a good. It kind of reminded me of underground comics in a way that it was a way for you to get out there and get your stuff published. And then um, some people would move up to the next level, and like you said, begin working professionally. And some others would just prefer to stay there and continue doing the zine work. And it kind of benefited everybody, and certainly the audience, at least in some cases.
Yeah, yeah. So like I kind of like this because we're like moving backwards in time. What, like, as a kid then, what were the types of things that you were reading? What were you ingesting as far as like comics or books or movies?
Yeah, I mean, I did read some comics. I was more. Um, I really didn't actually start reading superhero comics until I was an adult. I mean, I would still, I would read them every now and then, and I still read them. I have a decades-long habit at this point, but I didn't really start until I was in my early 20s in college. When I was a kid, it was all about humor magazines, and then uh, to a lesser extent, horror magazines. Um, and it was Mad and National Lampoon for sure are the biggest things that that led to this quivering mass you see in front of you today. But then anything else that was along those lines, I bought Love Mad was probably my favorite of all the Mad type magazines, but I still you know bought Cracked and Crazy and Sick, and anything that was a comedic slang term for mental illness, was going to be I would pick up. Um, and then like I said, the horror magazines and also horror novels and stuff like that. I was reading way too many horror novels at the age of 10
Yeah.
that recommended for anyone who's hoping to achieve anything in life. Um, like Stephen King, and most of his contemporaries at that time, just because my poor innocent naive mother just had no idea what any of this stuff was, so I bring the stack of Stephen King books up to the library counter, and she would just let me check them out with whatever else she was reading, and had no reason to think that I would be trying to sneak anything past her.
Yeah. It's like, he's reading. This is great.
Right. Little did she know it would create the horror.
Yeah. Was it you that I was talking to about Grant Morrison and his work at DC?
Could have been. I do love Grant Morrison, and he was actually uh, the writer that got me into comics as an adult. Yeah, and
Mhm.
you're right. I was telling you about this. A friend of mine in college had been trying to get me to read superhero comics, and I was just kind of like, hey, thanks, I appreciate it. I'm just not really interested right now. I've got plenty of things to read to keep me busy. And ultimately, he left a stack of Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol with me and said, hey, if you ever get a chance, just read this. I'm finished reading them. I'm not going to really do anything with them. So, and I had car trouble at one point, and had left the comics just in my car, and this
Mhm.
was before iPhones or anything, and I was bored out of my skull, so I just said I'll just check this out, and then just ended up loving it. And then after devouring Doom Patrol, I started looking for other things that Grant Morrison had done, and so that led me to Animal Man, and then
Yeah.
Peter Milligan had also written for Animal Man, so now I was interested in Peter Milligan, so I went and found Shade the Changing Man,
Mm.
and then also at that same time, Peter Milligan was writing a run on Detective Comics, and so that's what pulled me into the more mainstream comics, because I read his run on Detective Comics, and so that led me to reading Batman, and that so it was just kind of a natural progression, and before I knew it, I was buying 8-10 comics a week.
Yeah. That's
Great.
I was reminded of that part of the conversation this week because my comic shop that I go to put out like a new quarter bin, and I was going through
Mm-hmm.
that, and I found a couple issues of Grant Morrison's Animal Man. So now I'm trying to
Mm.
collect all those back issues now.
That's a
Uh,
great comic. That's
yeah.
mind blowing stuff.
Yeah, he's there's very little that I've read of his that um I haven't enjoyed. I mean, he's an incredibly talented writer. So,
Yeah, it just takes uh, stuff that I want to say shop worn because I like convention as much as anyone, but he takes stuff that you think you've seen 100 times before, and then he just finds a way to twist it and turn it
yeah.
into something really unique. And yeah, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's sort of what made I think at the time Watchmen feel like just so amazing is that there were all of these you know he they were going to be the Charlton Comics characters like Blue Beetle and
Right.
the Atom and um DC was like no don't break the characters yet. But like it was like these characters that felt old fashioned. Like even though he created them new, they felt kind of old fashioned, and it just breathed this different life into them. And
Right.
yeah.
A
And Grant
different time.
Morrison, I think, did that with Doom Patrol because Doom Patrol, like those old issues, it's like, I mean, it looks like I don't know, it looks like a prop in a television show. Like, let's make a superhero. Like this is Robot Man, and so,
And yeah,
uh,
definitely, and that stamp that he put on it is still. I mean, if you watch the Doom Patrol TV series, it's very much based on the Grant Morrison run. It's got Crazy Jane and the villain from
yeah.
the first season is Mister Nobody. So it's very much, and I mean, he pretty much completely changed the identity of Doom Patrol and what sort of comic book it was.
Hmm. I'm curious. Some of these props you have behind you.
Mm-hmm.
What do we
I just
have
kind
here?
of a little mad centric. I kind of I wanted to do just like a little medley of mad stuff. I've got the Alfred E. Newman cookie jar, and then
Yes.
behind that I've got the original art for the Al Jaffe fairy scenes from a fairy tale we'd like to see. Um,
Oh yeah.
that my wife got me for Christmas the year that it came out, and then well, it was yet more fairy tales we'd like to see, and then
Yeah.
is I wanted to do like they do on CNN where you have your book behind you, cleverly placed
Oh
as
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
so
Very
that's my
good. Yeah, you
little
did that
fart
with
joke.
David DeGrand, right? Yeah, another Texas boy.
Yep, just down the road.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we hang out probably not as much as we could, but we're both kind of shut in introverts, and he's got a couple of kids, and I've got endless excuses, but every now and then we'll get together. We're both part of the Texas Cartoonist Society, so every night whenever they have like a pizza pool party or whatever, we'll drag our wives there and hang out together for an afternoon, and we text quite often, so we're um, throwing around ideas for our next book. But yeah, he lives I would say probably just like 45 minutes down the road.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, the when you were saying the thing about being an introvert with an endless amount of excuses, during the lockdown here, I had my friend I was talking to him on the phone, he was like, "There's part of you that kind of likes this, isn't there?" I was like, "No." Why do you say that?
I
I
actually
mean,
heard
I
that.
can't hang out, but
I heard
the
I heard that from as well. Like, this is your dream scenario. I'm like, well, I don't dream about hundreds of thousands of people dying so that I can lay on the couch for a few more days. But it is it just kind of suit my natural inclination to to want to hunker down even when there's not a pandemic.
Yeah. Could you hold up that? Did you the Al Jaffe art? Did you say that was the original art from that?
Yes, it's before it's the the original artwork before it has obviously the more fairy tales we'd like to see before they put that on there, and it's the color is even a little bit different because I mean, I guess I don't. It seems like a little darker on the back cover. The way they
Yeah.
did it, and originally there was also going to be some dialogue. You can find the version with dialogue online, but the version they published didn't have any dialogue. But obviously, this is before they would have put the dialogue down. And she
Yeah.
Julie contacted Ryan Flanders, who was art director at the time, and
Hmm.
he put her in touch with Al Jaffe, and he made her a deal.
Oh man, that just made my heart jump when that.
Oh, and it's
Yeah.
well, flipping through, we like to kind of guide you through a roller coaster of emotions, a little excitement, a little intrigue, so
Yeah.
it's all staged,
What
of course.
Yeah. What you were saying about the colors, that's interesting because I thought it seemed like really like much brighter than anything I remember Mad printing. I mean,
Yeah,
well, at the
colors,
time,
the colors are definitely a lot different than well, I mean, somewhat different than the finished back cover.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's probably true of a lot of what they use or use.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your reaction? Like how, I mean, this is jumping like way forward in your career at Mad, but I mean, obviously it wasn't any good feeling, but what was that like when you heard that they were going to like cease publishing new materials?
It was kind of interesting because um, at that time, and this was like after Bill Morrison had left, and of course I am like anyone else who had been working for Mad when it was in New York, was very much on the edge of my seat when the new version began. Like, are they going to still use everybody? Are they going to still want to use my work?
Mm-hmm.
Going to happen? And I was very fortunate that that Bill wanted to keep using my stuff and bought from me regularly, and not only for the magazine, but also David and I did a fair amount of stuff for the website when they would do like really topical cartoons, single panels on Facebook and or social media, and then it would end up on the website. And so he really, I was like, oh, thank God, I put my mind at ease. But then after he left, I had a little more trouble getting stuff in or even hearing back from anyone. And then the last issue that I was in, there was a piece that I had written and they bought, and they had changed every single joke. The only thing that was still mine was the title, and of course, I'm it's not my first magazine to work for. I know it's a business, and I know that's an editor's right, but it's honestly the first time and last time so far that anything like that has happened. I mean, you get edited. They'll change some things around. Usually they'll tell you,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to switch this. Now we're going to change this. But never had I had anything to where I didn't recognize any of it. Like not one word was the same. They had just completely rewritten it and hadn't even said anything. And so I was at the time I was kind of like, I kind of, you know, bummed me out a little bit. And I was kind of like, I don't like the way this makes me feel, you know. So I kind of decided I don't know if I'm going to keep submitting stuff to them. I mean, they, you know, at this point, like I said, they weren't getting back to me.
Yeah.
That they weren't buying anything, and then the one thing they did buy in months, they completely changed. And so, and then right after that came the announcement, you know, that it was going to cease publication. So I was like, okay, well, there you go. I mean, it's still horrible because just like anything else, if Mad had continued on, a tide would have possibly turned. Where you're like, you know, maybe the people who didn't seem so crazy about my stuff, maybe they would move on, and some other people who, because that kind of thing happens all the time, you know, in magazines,
Yeah.
you know, you're on top, and then someone comes in, don't like your stuff, but then they move on, and the new people do like your stuff. So I mean, I would have been happy to wait for that, but again, the decision was kind of made for me. But and it kind of sucks that's where it ended. But I also I feel like I had a really good run, so I don't have anything to complain about, and I'm honestly not complaining about. That's just a story that of my last piece of Mad, and how hearing about it ceasing publication affected me.
Yeah.
Since I'd already wondered if I was going to keep sending stuff in, you know, it probably, you know, it kind of put a unique spin on how I felt when, you know, when I found out.
Yeah.
As a
Well,
horrified.
and I imagine it was like having it must be a bummer then to have sort of a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth for the last thing that you've, like, your last interaction with this magazine.
But you know, I mean, what you always hear is that everything, you know, it has some aspect of it. You know, when you achieve that you wanted forever, there's always going to be some aspect of it that's not exact. So taking that into account,
Yeah.
it was still, you know, like 99% of it was awesome. And if it's just that one little thing, you know, again, I have nothing to complain about. And again, like I said, you know, because I realized in a way that kind of makes me sound like a big baby, but I was kind of like, you know, it's just, I don't mind getting edited, but it was just like a weird, and I asked other writers and cartoonists, like, have you ever had this happen where they just like change everything and don't tell you? And other writers and artists were, at least, I don't know if maybe it was just for my benefit, but, you know, seemed horrified as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I said, it sucks, but it's like the tiniest thing out of an awesome, you know, over decade, you know, of being in the regularly. So again, you know, no complaints here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also in case people don't know, like the way, and this will be like, we don't have to dwell on this like one negative story, but like with Mad, it's work for hire. And so, you know, you submit something and they buy it from you and it's theirs. And there is that sort of like, you know, I get the impression from like the people I've spoken to, at least, that, you know, if that editing happens, it happens before the exchange of like money, like, here, now you own that, now I have money, you know, so that you would make the changes. So that's maybe what makes that your case exceptional, is that it seems like they bought it and then they changed it.
Right. And typically if there's any kind of change, it's something like, maybe I made a joke referencing one celebrity, and they felt the joke worked better with a different celebrity, but the joke still works, so they don't really change the joke. You know, and again, they would tell you that, oh, hey, instead of you know, Brad Pitt, we're gonna use Jennifer Love Hewitt, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
Excuse me, because you know they're kind of interchangeable, so it doesn't really screw up the joke. So things like that. and again, stuff that you're like, oh, I see they changed that, but it didn't. It's still basically the same joke. I'd never had anything happen where it was just like everything I had written had been scrapped and completely rewritten from the ground up. It was bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna do a U-turn back in time, but before I do, that Mad cookie jar. I love that
Mm-hmm.
thing. And you had it in that live stream we had done, and my sister found one of those, and like just a
Really?
few days before we spoke, yeah, and she gave me a call, and she was like, "Hey, Patty, I found this awesome thing. It was this Alfred E. Newman cookie jar." And it's like, "Oh wow, that's so cool." She goes, "Yeah, I really like it, but it was pretty expensive. So if you want it, you can go get it." But I don't want to spend that much money on you. But I think it might still be
Oh.
at the little antique shop, so I might try to hunt it down.
How did she say how much it was?
I think it was over 100.
Wow. Um,
Yeah.
I will say that, and I think I told this story last time too, so I'll just tell like a real brief version of it. When we used to have these Mad Magazine conventions in Dallas called Mad About Dallas, and one year one of the guests was Annie Gaines, and between the end of the convention and the go for the show dinner with everyone, there was like a couple or what, and Julie and I were the two of the locals, so we just had all the other people from Mad over to our house just to kind of hang out and have a drink and just kind of chat. And so when Julie was giving everyone the house tour, um, Annie was looking at my Mad area, and she actually said that she didn't have the cookie jar, and said she in fact had
Mm.
never even seen it before. And yeah, and I was blown away because if her house is just like a shrine to Mad and all the crazy stuff that she has in there. It's I can't imagine that there would exist a bit of Mad paraphernalia that she doesn't own. So that kind of gave me a little cock of the walk kind of feeling for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, well, especially, somebody so close to Bill, and just like you said, she
Hmm.
has everything. Why, why, why this one thing would she not have in her collection?
I
I'm
guess it just kind
curious.
of shows that the amount of
Oh, I think I spoke over you. I'm just going to continue talking. The one thing that I wonder though is if it was it a knockoff? Like did Mad actually have that made? Um, or could it be like one of those
think
sort
so.
of like things that was made on the side?
It's a good question, but when this was another thing that Julie got me for Christmas. My wife got me for Christmas. I'm very easy to shop for. Just
Yeah.
get me something with Mad on it, or some Spider-Man, or a slasher movie, and I'm very easy. And when she got it for me, it came in a box that had
Oh,
like
okay.
the Mad logo, it had you're right, DC Comics, Warner Brothers, all that stuff. So it was
Oh,
an
yeah, yeah, yeah.
actual piece of, but you get them very often either. So I don't know if it was something like, maybe it was something done for the Warner store back when, because I know when there was that Warner Brothers store and they had a lot of Mad
Yeah.
merchandise in there apparently. So maybe it was from that. I'm not sure where it's from,
Yeah, that Matt or the
but I just know it's in my.
I love that Warner Brothers store, and there was one in Southdale Mall. That means nothing to you, but just the mall near my house. And I always thought it was crazy. They would have like you could get cells from animation. It's like they had everything there. I just
Mhm.
wish I was like like wise enough to like con my parents into buying some of that stuff for me.
I know. I wish I could go back and get some of that stuff that that they had there, um, so easily, you know, um, achievable to go in there and grab all of it. And for some reason, I didn't get all of it. I got some of it, but yeah, hindsight,
Yeah.
regret. Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the hallmarks of my life.
Well, it's like that final thing at Mad, right? If that's like the worst regret you have, that's pretty good.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. No.
yeah.
No legitimate complaints.
Yeah. Now you worked for Mad's greatest competitor, Cracked Magazine.
Hmm. Hmm. I
How,
did.
how did
The truth can come out now.
Yeah, now you have to answer for your sins, all right?
I knew this day would come.
So what is like how did that happen? I mean, like I don't know how much time was between like you working for Joe Bob Briggs and then Cracked Magazine, but like how did Cracked Magazine come about for you?
It was probably about like 5 years between Joe Bob and Cracked, and in between there was like a lot of uh, Hustler and other similar news mags. Um, and at the time, it was that I started actually buying Cracked again. I always pretty much bought Mad, and Cracked I'd stopped buying when I was a kid, pretty much. And then I picked one up and flipping through it, noticed that they had been the staff had been changed recently, and most of the staff were former National Lampoon contributors, and
Hmm.
then also Lou Silverstone from Mad was an editor, and so that really piqued my interest, and so I started buying it. And it was one of the things I never really cared for about Cracked when I was a kid. They always um, called themselves the clean humor magazine, and I was always just put off by humor that said it was like clean or goody goody, just because I always felt like humor shouldn't be too nice.
Yeah.
You don't have to go out of your way to hurt somebody's feelings, but it kind of goes against the general aesthetic of comedy to we're clean, we're nice, friendly jokes. They still had some good stuff in there, but the whole idea kind of put me off, even though I could would buy it still. And
Yeah.
so
I
when
didn't I didn't
I
realize that they had
started
that
buying,
tagline. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize that they
there
had the
was
tagline that they were
no.
the clean humor magazine.
I remember saying something about it, like in a letter column that I was reading as a kid, and I just remember reading it, and it just kind of made me cringe. And even as a 9 or 10 year old, I was like, I mean, comedy doesn't have to be dirty, but it's not supposed to be friendly and clean. It just kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies or something.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't like that's what they had plastered on their cover. In the letters column, they refer, well, that's why I Cracked the clean here. And I think like maybe someone's mom had written in a letter and threw out all his mads, but he could keep his cracks. And I don't remember it. Uh, but I started buying it again in the early '90s. It was kind of like almost like a National Lampoon Junior. Kind of obviously not as vulgar, but it sort of had that same sort of attitude, and it was off color and kind of bizarre. And so I started reading it and enjoying it. And I noticed that they were actually using single panel gag cartoons every now and then. And that was primarily what I was doing at the time. I would do some writing, but the bulk of what I was doing was single panel gag cartoons. And
Yeah.
so I sent them a package, like a dozen single panel cartoons, and they got back to me and they said, "Well, this isn't really what we're looking for, but we like how you think, so keep sending stuff in." And so I'm like, "Oh hell, okay, well." And then I went and I really looked through Cracked and said, "Okay, what kind of stuff are they using?" And so I took several of my single panel um, cartoons, and they're the same for single panel cartoons where it's, when it works, it's hopefully a good distillation of the perfect moment of when the joke happens. And you gotta find that moment. That's where the gag cartoon comes in. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna retell some of these single panel gag cartoons, but kind of go back a couple of moments that lead up to the gag. And so I redid them as full page comic strips.
Okay.
With
Yeah.
6 to 8 panels, because they were doing a lot of those, I noticed.
Mhm.
And of course, Mad is okay, staple. And
Yeah.
so I did that. Bought like 4 or 5 of them first time out, and then they had even better. They had Donald Hare, who I've always been a huge fan of. You had him drawing them. I just was beside myself. I couldn't believe that he had drawn one of my jokes, and so that turned into I guess probably just like a 3-year thing before it got taken over by Dick. And I had some good years there. And thought it was and still think it was a really funny magazine at the time.
Yeah.
And then Culpa came in. He didn't really seem to, pardon me, care for my stuff too much. He's an odd guy. He told me we had a couple of phone conversations, and one time he told me that my stuff was the only stuff that he thought the previous version of Crack that was any good. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I found out he'd been telling other people the same thing. When I don't know, because it turned out to not be true, because I couldn't get again, I couldn't get anything published there. And so I eventually I just gave up and started. This is when I started working for the online version of National Lampoon. So I was just like, oh, I'm not going to worry about Crack right now. But then I did end up going back to Crack for a while, because a friend of mine, Martin Jalad, who had been the editor and creator of a humor magazine called Thwack, Dick Culpa hired him to work at Cracked. He and Scott Gosar, and I knew both of them, and so they said, "Hey, why don't you come back and do some stuff for Cracked? We're here now, and we like your stuff, and we'll give it a fair shake." And they did, but and again, I'm sure he was a nice guy. I met him in person once, and he seemed like a nice guy, but he kept doing stuff like he would publish something that I had written, but for some reason leave my name off it, and not only just my name off, but say written and illustrated by the guy who illustrated it. And it was just like one thing after the other. Like I got the go ahead to write a 2-page article, like when you're at you're a bad rock groupie when, or there's like the rock groupie do's and don'ts, and it was in pretty poor taste, but they Martin and Scott really liked it, and they gave it to an artist, and the artist drew it, final art, and then Doug Culpa looked at it and he said, "This is disgusting. It's not fun, and it's not going in my magazine." And this is like at 0 hour, after the artist had already turned in his final. There would have been plenty of time to reject this piece. If you were going to reject it, and it was just a lot of nonsense like that. That I was kind of like, all right.
Yeah, you should have hit him up and been like, "No, Dick, you're forgetting. I'm the guy whose art and writing you loved in the previous version. Remember?"
I should have said that in a crowded room, or something.
Yeah. Do you? I don't want to use any terms like favorite or greatest, but as somebody who's done primarily writing for Mad Magazine, is there an artist that you remember like feeling especially excited to have draw your work?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest one has got to be uh, Al Jaffe. I mean, that is just something that I still have to pinch myself from time to time because he was always one of my favorites in Mad and continues to be so. Just the writing art, just 100% top notch. Um, I also uh, as a Mad artist who was had not begun working for Mad yet when I became a big fan of his work. It was also really cool to have something drawn by Peter Bagg. That was
Mm.
amazing. And also a couple of things by Evan Dorkin for the same reason. Um,
Yeah.
Love his stuff for Mad, but uh, I'd been a fan of his for years before Mad. Um, and also, one of my favorite things I did for Mad was drawn by Tom Richmond, and that was a huge deal too. That Sheen Lantern piece for the Mad 20 a few years back, and he did
Yeah.
such an amazing job on that. So I mean, those are probably the biggest ones. I'm embarrassed if I'm uh, not thinking of anyone right now, but the big one is just Al Jaffe because he's now one of the he's a star at Mad. He's on the cool there. He's one of uh, the big guys at Mad. So to have a chance to write something for him.
So I'm embarrassed because I'm finally putting together that the original Al Jaffe artwork you own is something that you wrote.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I probably fumbled through my description of it as I do most things. So that's more than likely not your fault.
Well, I mean, like now, I mean, it would be just it would be awesome to own an original piece of Al Jaffe artwork, but yeah, to have something that you had a hand in creating, I think is like even double cool.
I, I'm gonna be bare with it for sure.
Yeah, I remember Matt Lassen
And
mentioning
okay,
in his interview that like the Mad 20, it can be especially difficult to get things into. Um and like you had
yeah.
just mentioned you got in twice, which is impressive. Twice more than
Mm,
many people. Um like what was the how did
thank you.
you
That's
because this was
so
your
much.
first appearance into it.
Hmm. And that was kind of just an interesting bit of happenstance because Scott and I submitted like just a single panel um, concept of the Sheen Lantern, um, and it was just Charlie Sheen as Green Lantern, and maybe he was doing a gag line or something. And
Yeah.
they got back to us and they said we don't really want to use this as a single panel gag, but we do think that it might work as something for the 20. And that, of course, can always change up till the last minute because that's how they wanted to keep the Mad 20, where just the most as topical as it could be. They said, so we can't promise you that we're going to use it. We don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the year, but if you'll let us hang on to it, we might want to use it, and that's all we can promise. And so I talked over with Scott, and we were both like, yeah, totally, let's do it. And then they they ended up, luckily using it for the Mad 20 and guy. And again, even more fortunately, getting Tom to drop, because again, it's just, just gorgeous.
It is indeed gorgeous. We lost him again. I have to say, I think my favorite part of this, as a comic book fan, is the way you rewrote the Green Lantern creed. In highest day and drunken night, my torch career is burning bright. Let fools and trolls exploit my plight, my tiger blood they cannot fight.
It's funny, and thank you. That's funny. Is that's I think that I know Scott and I wrote that together. I think because I want to make sure he gets his credit where credit's due. I think I came up with the first part, and he came up with the second part. That was very much a collaboration, right until the 0 hour. We kept coming, trading. And again, that's another thing where the editors were very, very hands-on with the Mad 20. You would be sending emails back and forth, changing stuff, coming up with, variations on the ideas, and very much a flurry of activity.
Yeah, it's one thing, like if people are unaware, because Charlie Sheen, I think, has been out of the spotlight for quite a long time. Charlie Sheen had a somewhat, not somewhat, extremely public meltdown, downfall, where he was self-recording messages and like sending them out to the press. And tiger blood was one of those like terms that got coined and became a part of pop culture for a good while.
He was, his entire, I don't think he had a reality show, but his life kind of was a reality show. He was living in a mansion with porn stars, and I don't think he ever actually, maybe he did have a reality show, but even before then, his life kind of was a reality show. So that was one of those type of, like you said, a very public meltdown.
Yeah. But hey, at least we got some yucks out of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to act like that in public, Matt is going to have to come after you. I mean, that's part of the arrangement.
Yeah,
Matt had with the country.
Yeah. So what are you up to now? Now that Mad is no longer on the table, unfortunately, what types of things are you getting into?
Probably the thing that keeps me busiest is I'm the managing editor at Weekly Humorist, which is an online humor magazine, and it's actually doing pretty good. So the reason it's keeping me busy is fortunate. We've been on several of those lists, humor sites you should be reading and stuff. So we're actually, that's getting us a lot of attention, and we're actually talking to with some people about potentially branching out into other media. We've got a line of Weekly Humorist books, and in addition to that, thinking about again, we're really way too early to have any details, but maybe some interest from TV and movie people. So we'll just wait and see. It's a great site. There's a lot of mad people who regularly contribute. Peter Cooper does a lot of single panels for us. DeGrand is in there quite often. I know I'm going to forget some people, but Matt Lassen does a lot of stuff for it. In fact, was one of the first, has written 2 Weekly Humorist books. Ivan Ehlers.
Yeah.
A lot of mad people in it. And then you've got even like people from SNL or the Conan O'Brien show, or just a lot of people who write comedy and TV. So it's a really strong site. It's a combination of written pieces and parodies and comic strips and cartoons, and there'll be like um, parodies of magazine covers. When the pandemic was in full swing, we had one where it was a spoof, a cover of a Playboy called Plague Boy, and it's the model with the mask on her face,
Yeah.
and a bunch of headlines. So it's very topical, pretty political. Yeah, went after Trump a lot, and came back with bloody fists more often than not. It's the guy who created Weekly Humorist and is the editor in chief. He was creative director at National Lampoon for like 10 years, and then the editor in chief there for another year. And that's where we met. I was writing a lot of
Is
stuff
that
for the Lampoon.
Michael Gerber?
No, that's the guy who does American Bystander. Actually, the guy.
Oh
who
man,
does,
that's embarrassing.
No. There's they both start with M. And plus you can just edit that out if you want.
Oh yeah.
Or just do a voiceover. It's Marty Dundix is the Weekly Humorist guy, and he is and again, because he knows so many people in comedy, he was able to rally the troops and get everyone working for the magazine. So it has a lot of former Lampoon people, and
yeah, that's really cool.
It's a great group of people.
Yeah. Now, I have a question, because you mentioned the Plague Boy. There was I think I found him on your Instagram. Embarrassingly, I just go on Instagram. I don't actually use the internet except for anything but YouTube. So like I follow Weekly Humorist, but I didn't realize they had a website. But did you do the writing? Yeah. Did you write the Plague Boy and Quarantine?
I did. I'm sorry. I'm excited to say it.
No,
I feel bad because I was plugged.
Well, no, because I loved it. I love both of them. Like it was I think yeah, I think Quarantine cracked me up, and I actually have pulled up. I don't know if you can see it. I have your Instagram, and it's I have to I would highly you're one of the very few people on Instagram who can get me to consistently laugh out loud. There's lots of people I'll be like, that laugh when you just kind of exhale through your nose quickly, I do that a lot, but your comics crack me up, and it's
thanks, man.
It's kind of demented. I think I have maybe said on a stream I think something's wrong with Kit Lively, but I mean that in a very complimentary way.
That's exactly how I take it, so don't worry.
Yeah, excellent.
There's
so you have
compliment.
Yeah, well, and I didn't know that you were the managing editor of Weekly Humorist as well. So that's really cool. And that's where people can see a lot of your work as well. But also,
yeah, I mostly write.
Oh no, you finish your thought. Oh, okay.
Mostly writing.
You also have the Twisted Tongues, jokes, comics, facts, and tongue twisters for young adults or old children.
Yes, right.
And this is something you worked with friend of the show, David DeGrand, on. He does the illustrations of these, and you, along with David Lumen, did some of the writing.
Yes, he's got a very impressive resume as well. Yeah, it is a book for kids, and I guess and preteens. But I will say that I can pretty much guarantee that if you're an adult with a fairly immature sense of humor, that you will like it. Because even when I'm writing for kids, and this is the rule I had for myself when I used to write for the SpongeBob comics, is that just because you're writing for kids, you know, you don't write down to them. I still, for me, writing for kids just means that you know, there probably won't be any dildo jokes.
Yeah.
But other than that, it should still be pretty much my same, you know, my same, I would, you know, standard, however low it may be, for writing, hopefully funny stuff. And so I don't want to use other kids, you know, they'll like this as an excuse. It still has to be funny. And so I do feel like this is a book that if you're an adult and you can still allow yourself to laugh at jokes about, you know, farts and tapeworms and you know, use band-aids and you know, things of that nature, that it is funny.
Yeah.
And even my wife funny, and she's like really tired of me at this point, and she even thought it was funny.
Well, that's a good sign then. Well, I like your
That's
standards
the
that
truth.
you've set for yourself and writing for kids. I mean, I work my real job. I work with kids. I'm an elementary school teacher, and it's like the silliness I have with my friends is basically the silliness I have with kids, except the content is different, like you were saying. And but yeah,
Right.
like
Exactly.
kids
We're all
like
people.
to laugh and not have it be, you know, they don't want it to be childish. They want to feel a little like
Yeah.
respected.
You don't
So,
have to dumb it down. You know, a kid will appreciate a clever booger joke. You know, because you can write a clever booger joke. Um, One's not coming to mind right now, but I think there's probably some in the book. Um, but yeah, you can, just because something is, you know, immature or gross, or what some people, you know, say silly, doesn't mean that it can't be, um, you know, well done.
yeah. Well, I have a very well written booger joke. I didn't write it. I think it's as old as the hills, which
Oh,
is how do you make a
let's hear
tissue
it. Lay it.
dance?
Huh.
You put a little
I don't think
boogie
I
in
know this
it.
one. I do know that one. And also, it's not only a booger joke, but it's a disco joke. So it's like, it's, you know, it's bringing us all closer together.
It is, yeah. It's uniting the booger jokes unite the world.
They do bring us closer together just because we're all sticking to each other. You know, I think.
Yeah. But Kit, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about MAD and your writing and your projects and what you got coming up. Honestly,
Any,
the best follow you can have on Instagram is Mr. Kit Lively. It is worth it. It's worth every penny that you'll pay to follow him on
well,
Instagram.
that's true.
Yeah, but yes, thank
Truth
you
in
so
advertising.
much. And if you want to support him, yeah,
Anytime.
follow him and buy Twisted Tongues and Jokes and Comics. Toodaloo.
Thanks, everybody.